The essence of segmentation is that everyone in the market is not your customer. Okay, so you break up the market into small groups and try to identify which is the group that best can be served by your product or by your company. And that is called as segmentation. So we are essentially breaking up the market into different groups and studying them. So for example, here is this deck of cards. So in what ways can you segment this deck of cards? On the basis of red and black, on the basis of suits. And you could also do a segmentation based on the numbers versus letter to groups. And that is really what segmentation is all about. Okay, so here's an example. So for example, UTS has to develop an online MBA program for its digital marketing students, and it wants to identify the group of students who may want to enroll in that program. So what are some of the criteria that UTS could possibly use to segment their market for online MBA or identify their market for online MBA for digital marketing? All right, so let me tell you, this is an exercise that was actually done by UTS because they started the Masters of Digital Marketing program. And what UTS did was they actually studied the group of students who, study MBA programs in digital marketing and analytics. And out of that, when they surveyed that group of students, including new potential students who are, professionals in the industry, what they found was that there was this unique segment of consumers who were working. They wanted to do an MBA in digital marketing, but they wanted an option to be able to complete this course before 2 years' time. And there was this group of students who had like 1 to 5 years experience in the industry, and they wanted to harness that experience while continuing to work and study so that they could apply for higher management roles or like middle to higher management roles in the industry. So that's how the Masters for Digital Marketing program was developed. And it caters to these students who are working and have a very specialized requirement for doing this digital marketing course. So there are other examples as well that are given, and you may want to reflect. For example, Amazon, how would it segment its corporate customers to find the target segments for cloud services? This is an example you would observe in your daily lives. Think about a Chinese restaurant where you went to have yum cha, and you want to help them design their lunch menu and dinner menu. So what are the different ways in which you will think about? The final one is an example of Coca-Cola that wants to segment its market, but its criteria for segmentation is well defined here. For example, they want to look at price sensitivity, preference of diet versus regular soda, and preference of Coke versus Pepsi. And Coke and Pepsi both are known for their market research experiments, for their market research in the beverages category. And during one of these experiments held a couple of years ago, where there's high incidence of obesity in the American market, and one of the experiments revealed that people wanted a better option which was not so sugary, although the loyalty of the consumers remained with either Coke or with Pepsi. So there's a very distinct segment of consumers in the US which are Coke loyal versus that are Pepsi loyal. So when this study was carried out among these consumers, what they found was that the consumers wanted some more healthy versions of the drinks. And that's how they came up with these health drinks. And the concept of health drinks started about 5 to 10 years ago. And that has become actually a big category now. Okay, so these are some instances of segmentation. Now, what exactly is the principle of segmentation? So the idea, like I told you, is to divide the whole market into different groups of consumers. Now, the important thing to note about these different groups of consumers is that the behavior of consumers in this group of green consumers is similar to one another. If they are Coke loyal, all of them share that passion for Coke as a common factor. The blue consumers would be the Pepsi loyal consumers. The orange ones could be probably the ones who are indifferent to either of the brands but prefer health drinks. So that is the one important thing. So all consumers within a group tend to have similar likes and dislikes, right? So they tend to behave in a similar manner. They have similar preferences in their product choices, etc. So the firms are able to identify how each group is going to be different from another group, and that helps the firms to be able to design products catered especially for a specific group and to design promotions around that. So in practice, these are the two principles that you have to remember, that the members of each group are similar to one another, but there are clear differences between the subgroups. So the subgroup green is going to be very different from the subgroup blue in their consumption of products and preferences. So this is a basic guiding principle of segmentation. Now, the important thing about segmentation is that when you engage in the process, when the firms engage in the process of segmentation, targeting, and positioning, what happens is that they are able to identify the segments using cluster analysis for segmenting the market. And then they are able to pick up the target segments based on other criteria like revenue generation, customer lifetime value, etc., etc. And then once they have selected the segments that the firm wants to serve, then that helps them create a competitive advantage to position their products for those segments. So the idea over here is that this entire process of segmentation, targeting, and positioning helps to generate value. And that value comes from the fact that the resources that are available to the marketer are more focused, and they help to cater to specific preferences for the brand. So for example, like I told you, for health beverages, Pepsi has a different line of products. So that helps to meet the needs of the segment that they were missing out on earlier because they were not willing to consume carbonated beverages, drinks. And the customers become brand loyal. So if Pepsi is, let's say it was the first entrant in the market with this line of health drinks, so the consumers who might have switched from the other brands, there was a high chance that they would have become brand loyal, or after repeated purchases and favorable experiences also, the loyalty can increase. So all of these factors, they lead to increased market share. So the most important factor here is brand loyalty, which leads to higher market share. And by its nature, it then creates a barrier to competition. That means the other incumbents find it hard to compete with the leading player in the market. And because there are fewer marketing resources needed over time, it becomes more economic for the firm, and the overall profitability or the value to the firm increases. And not only the value to the firm, but the value to the consumer. And then we come to the benefits of segmentation. Now, there are benefits both to the company and to the consumer. So the company is able to identify what is, the requirement in the market. Is there a segment of consumers with unfulfilled needs? And if you design products for that particular segment, that segment benefits because of the savings that accrue in terms of the convenience, availability of the products, the time, and also tailored products and services. Furthermore, communication can be more targeted. And like we have studied in the previous classes, that Increasingly, because of the stress in the environment, because of the competition, and also because of COVID, what is happening is that the manufacturers are designing loyalty strategies to acquire new customers, to retain the existing customers. So there's more personalized promotion and communication. And all this also leads to optimization of resources. The budgets can be allocated in a more optimal manner across the various, marketing tools that are available. And this also results in a personalized experience. And if you would have watched one of the videos today, which is on Kohl's supermarket shopping, the flybys program, that exactly will tell you, the type of personalized experiences that you can get depending on how much you are spending at Kohl's. So take a look at that video. It's very helpful to understand. Okay, and I'm sure that personalized experience is something that you all must be experiencing in your purchase of the products as consumers. So it's something that is not new to the market, this concept, but it's just how we experience it. That's the important part. All right, so here's an example of segmentation, and this is again in the medical market. Think about, the market of patients who experience headaches. So there would be different types of consumers. So one is those who have very chronic headaches, the other ones who they have headaches, but they're reliant on the medicines. There could be others which are like super stressed reactionaries. There are others who have a healthy lifestyle, but on occasions they might experience headaches. So to cater to these different types of consumers, so don't worry about the numbers here. To cater to these different types of customers, depending on how they react to these headaches, the marketeers design, whatever the Panadol, paracetamol, and all these medicines to take care of each of these segments. So that's why you see that some medicines have a powerful effect immediately. The others, but they might come with a downside of having some side effects. But there are others which have a fast effect, and there would be others which you can safely take on a continuing basis for 2, 3, 4 days because they have no side effects. So these are some of the important things to look at when you're looking at your market of consumers, how they would react, and what are their needs. So for this particular market, their needs are different because they react differently to the medicines based on the intensity of headaches. Okay. Then in terms of personalization. So we talked about personalization. How are the marketers making use of all the information that they are gathering? So a very simple example is that, that there's a lot of data being collected. We are in the age of big data. We are in the age of analytics. We are in the age of artificial intelligence. And all of that is being processed using machine learning algorithms, which are able to process large amounts of data. And that is being used to design products to cater to the needs of customers, if we can say so, the age of Uber personalization. So here's an example of Alexa. So Alexa actually gathers your data as well. It listens to what you're saying, those instructions, the commands that you're giving, all that is data which is getting stored. What you're shopping, what is your requirement of infotainment information, what are the factors related to other activities like driving, home control. So what are the activities you engage in? And this information is consistently pooled across the entire set of customers in the whole world. And it is used to make this product even more and more personalized. So it is able to, for example, understand your requirements with a minimal number of words to be able to get you the answers. But of course, when we talk about personalization, we also have to, there are some downsides. So how many of you have heard of Rocco the parrot? What did he do? So there was this little parrot in a zoo somewhere, and I just read a little about it. Let's see, here it is. So there was this parrot in a zoo somewhere, and this parrot was used to, screaming a lot and using a lot of mischief words and swear. And so the zoo could not, keep the parrot, and it was adopted by a customer. And what actually happened was that this parrot was very sharp and listening to the conversation between the customer and Alexa. So the recording here. I just want you to hear this, but this is not something that will be recording. All right, so that is about personalization and the use of these tools. So if you're using Google Home and you're using Alexa, then you will enjoy a variety of these features. Now, at this point of time, I want to ask you all, how many of you are you all comfortable with the idea that Google or Alexa is recording your information, hearing your conversations? How do you all feel about this? I was reading a report that the current generation seems to be very comfortable with the technology and does not really, it does not, the level of privacy concerns are perhaps lower than the other generations like the baby boomers, etc. All right, so moving on, we talked about the different bases of segmenting the market. So, we talked about segmenting in a way that we can distinguish between the groups. Now, how do we distinguish between the groups? So what kind of variables or what kind of basis can we use to segment the markets? There are three: the demographic, behavioral, and needs-based segmentation. So the demographic segmentation is, like you all are aware, using demographic variables which describe your age, income, education, and this is what you are also collecting in your survey, right? Some of this information. The behavioral information would be more about what you're purchasing, how much you are purchasing, what is that share of volume that you're purchasing, how quickly you adopt products. So for example, just now in this class, we noticed that we might not be as quick to adopt these, assistants, artificial intelligence assistants. So that is called as the speed of adopting. So we are probably laggards as far as that technology is concerned. So these are all behaviors, and they are very important too. They are very important segmentation variables. And then we have the need-based variables like attitudes or beliefs about a product, preferences for a product or service needs. And this is a part that you're doing in your conjoint analysis. And needs-based segmentation is actually a very good, it is one of the best ways of segmenting your market, provided that your firm has enough budgets to be able to engage in these kind of data collection exercises and to be able to engage in market research. So again, this slide is kind of important from your survey design point of view. So you are using part words. You are trying to uncover the part words to understand the attitudes or beliefs or preferences about using a category. So you are engaging in need-based segmentation. So there might be cases when you're trying to enter a new market and you do not have behavioral or needs-based data. You do not have the budgets to collect that data, even if it exists. So in that case, the best case scenario that you could do is acquire the demographic data, which usually is available for free, and then perhaps use that particular data for segmentation. Okay. Your question, can you think of some examples of need-based segmentation? I can give you a hint. You would observe this a lot in the grocery stores like Woolies and Coles, just to give you the simplest example and the hint. Segmentation would be the design, the availability of shampoos and conditioners. Think about that when you go to the grocery stores to purchase shampoos and conditioners. There are so many varieties of shampoos available. Some are meant for dry hair, some are meant for dandruff, and some are meant for brittle hairs, etc., etc. Some are meant for colored hair. So that is an example of need-based segmentation, where the products are designed based on a specific need that the consumer has. Okay. Okay. So the important thing is about demographics is you are able to answer the question that who are these people who exist in the market? Behaviors is what they do, and the needs is why they engage in certain behaviors or why they engage in purchase of certain products. So those are the three most common bases of segmentation. However, like I told you, the need-based segmentation is the best of all the segmentations. When you are using demographics, what is the downside of demographic segmentation? So the one is that we talk in terms of the demographic twins. You might not be able to get homogeneous segments because two people of similar demographics might still be very different. And if you're just segmenting your market on the basis of demographics, people who were actually could have been classified into two different segments might be erroneously classified into one segment. So think about this example of a male born in 1948, British nationality, second marriage, affluent, from a very well-known family. So we can think of Prince Charles as one and the Prince of Darkness as the other one, Ozzy Osbourne, right? Two very different people with very different lifestyles, with very different behaviors and very different needs. So that is a thing to be kept in mind, that this is one of the disadvantages of demographics segmentations. Two people in the same segment might end up being different because of their behaviors and their needs. All right, then again, behavioral is also something similar to what we saw for demographics. So for example, there is, it is believed that, okay, if you've got behavioral data, you can, identify the needs of the consumers and attitudes of the consumers, but that might not necessarily be true. For example, buyers of Louis Vuitton monogram bag. So they could think about this. Paris Hilton, the hotel heiress, has a great collection of bags of all types, varieties. But on the other hand, you also have a political figure who's also using the Louis Vuitton bag, but for a different reason. So in one case, it is more for, celebrity status, advertising, influencing. On the other hand, it's purely for functional use also, but also to project that status. So two people their behaviors might not necessarily reflect their needs and attitudes. And which is why we say that the need-based segmentation is the best segmentation. Now, this is a case study about Starbucks and why it failed in Australia. And this is a very good example because Starbucks is a very strong brand in the America. But here, when they launched their products, this brand really, really struggled. It's very popular in North America, but it's just still struggling here in Australia. So I'll just give you some background about Starbucks. So Starbucks, in Australia, the coffee culture is essentially more of European culture or the Italian culture, where people really love to come to coffee shops to aggregate and, have conversations with one another. And they love to frequent the same coffee shops more or less more often because they know the people, the owners, and they love to interact with them. And so it's more of a social thing, and coffee is just a product to facilitate that. So that's the kind of culture we have in Australia. And also, another thing that makes Australians very different from Americans is a more comparatively more higher preference for a healthy lifestyle. So, for example, the Aussie consumers are not into very sugary drinks, right? So, when Starbucks entered Australia, their coffee was just another premium brand product in the market. It was not something to facilitate dialogue or conversation among a group of friends. It was more like, okay, you come into the coffee shop, you buy a product, have it, consume it, and that's it. And their range of coffee options were also very highly sugary. So those were the primary factors why Starbucks did not do well in the Australian market. It took time for Starbucks to understand this, and ultimately they had to close a majority of their stores in Australia. Now there are a very few handful stores. The one of the other factors, the third factor, was that Starbucks positions itself as a premium brand, and when they came to Australia, they actually opened their stores all across Australia, and there was no exclusivity to the stores. So the consumers did not understand, why should I go to Starbucks and buy a more expensive coffee when I can get a really good coffee at my neighborhood cafe, right? So there was no element of exclusivity as far as Starbucks was concerned in Australia. So these are some of the primary reasons why Starbucks failed in Australia. But take a look, it's a very nice documentary which will talk about the behaviors of the consumers, etc. Okay, so apart from that, I want you to watch these videos on behavioral-based segmentations. This is about Kohl's, about their promotional programs. So let me see if this one works. Just keeping fingers, although you should.
Competitive, cutthroat world of supermarkets, where with $130 billion up for grabs each year, knowing who your consumer is and what they're buying is king. Wesfarmers and Coles have appointed digital veteran John Mirakovsky as the head of Australia's largest loyalty program, Flybuys. In his first interview as boss, he says he's looking to sign more Aussies up, having their shopping habits tracked in exchange for discounts and deals.
And so the data that we collect is used to make the offers relevant to them. We certainly are looking to increase value for our members, and part of that is by growing the partner network.
8 million Australians, or 2 out of 3 households, have a Flybuys card, enjoying discounts on fuel and on groceries at the checkout. Today, the new boss announcing new partnerships, including deals with Optus and Discovery Holiday Parks. Book 3 or more nights accommodation to use before June 30 and receive 10,000 bonus Flybuys, the equivalent of a $50 Coles voucher. But despite the deals, many Aussies aren't saving as much as they could.
Certainly engage in the program. Understand that the offers that are being sent to you. So we put a lot of work into making sure that the offers are relevant. So if you haven't downloaded the app, I would say do so.
Experts say the best way to come out on top with loyalty cards is to use it on your regular purchases. Don't be sucked into offers on products just to get a freebie.
The data can be used for good. You can get great offers, you can collect more points, and sometimes it's free money. You're getting free points for things you'd have done anyway. So don't say no, just think carefully before you say yes.
Lizzie Pearl, 9 News.
Okay, so I want to add one more thing over here, that there is a difference between the Woolies rewards program as well as the Kohl's rewards program. And it is also, that difference is also based on the behaviors. So the segment of consumers that goes to Woolies for shopping prefers to redeem their points in the form of cash. So that's why you'll notice that after a certain number of use, if you're using everyday rewards at Woolies, automatically you will get a $10 discount based on the number of points that you have accumulated, apart from other things that everyday rewards offers. In Kohl's, you will notice that as you go on accumulating the flyby points, it's like 1 point for every dollar that you spend in Kohl's. They then study. So this data is collected to understand the purchases that you make, and then the promotions in the store are designed. So for example, there is a current promotion going on in Kohl's that if you earn this many number of points, credits, Kohl credits, you are going to get, some ovenware, MasterChef ovenware for free or something like that. So that is based on these behaviors, purchasing behaviors that are documented when consumers swipe their Flybuys card, etc. Apart from other specialized offers that Flybuys will send you into your email account, which is specially designed just for you based on your individual purchases. So Flybuys, everyday rewards, these are good examples of behavioral segmentation. All right, so coming back to our slides. These are the remaining are also examples of segmentation. For example, the consumers can be segmented by the usage of the products, by channels that they use, price sensitivity, etc. So I want you all to watch these videos. And product-based segmentation is the example of, a football jersey, how it can be used in many different ways. But I think what I wanted to highlight was these two main types of segmentation that was about the shopping behaviors, and the other one was the failure of Starbucks because they could not successfully segment their markets. Now, apart from all these different types of segmentations that we have looked at, there is a lot of technology. There are tools to help you analyze the different segments that exist in the market. But Google Analytics has the features which helps you to analyze the segments. So you can add the segments to your existing segments in the market. You can analyze segment by segment. So for example, here, this is about shopping activity of online shoppers. So how many shoppers that previously came have had no shopping activity, or those who shopped, browsed for products, but did not add products in the carts. But there is another segment of consumers who adds products in the cart, but abandons their carts. Right, so that is called as checkout abandonment, and this actually has become a lot of problem in recent times because of extreme competition, availability of technology such as price comparison tools, etc. So Google Analytics is a very useful tool for you to identify the problems across the segments and how the segments, are performing. So that is the important. So here is a company called Prism Premier. This company collects data about, the demographic data, behavioral data, shopping data, technology usage data of the households in the US. And this data is very, very precious data. It's very expensive data that the firms actually buy the secondary data when they want to understand the, characteristics of a market and then segment that market depending on the type of product that they are wanting to sell. So this is for your reference. So this is a company that collects data which can be used for segmentation, and they collect all types of data, behavioral, demographic, lifestyle, etc., attitude data as well. All right, so need-based segmentation, one, I have told you that it's very important. So it is the best type of segmentation you can engage in. And the basis that you use for segmentation or the variables are the preferences, like you are doing in conjoint analysis. That you could design surveys to understand their decision processes, to understand their needs. So for example, in one of the lectures on conjoint, we had looked at choice-based conjoint, best-worst conjoint. So all these are examples of collecting different types of data that can be used for further segmentation of the market. Now, the remaining other types of data, for example, the demographic data like age, income, education, etc., or in the case of B2B markets, if you have, for example, the industry size, the type of industry, the location, the structure of the industry, once you have identified the segments by using these variables like preferences, You can separate the segments, and for each segment, you can describe the segment by using, for example, how they differ in their average age, in their education, etc., etc. So you can do simple descriptive analytics in Excel after you have uncovered all the segments in the data. So this is the same as the previous slide, but the variables have been defined in more detail here. So this is something for your reference for your project. So if you're trying to understand what type of demographic variables do we want in the survey, so the important ones are listed over here. So same way for psychographics. So you can look at all these different types of descriptor variables, and you could possibly include them in your survey, but also to highlight that the length of your survey should not be more than 5 to 7 minutes, because that is also an important criteria. But depending on the context and the product category you have, you can choose the most important descriptor variables that you think will apply to your product. All right. Once you have obtained the data for the need-based segmentation, that will be the ratings data, like most of you, and I will advise that you collect data on ratings rather than rankings. So you gather that data, you run a conjoint analysis, you run the analysis, regression analysis, to uncover the pathwords, and then you use those pathwords to segment the market. Okay, so let's take a look into more detail. So here's an example of preference-based segmentation. So in this particular example, there are 3 segments that have been identified. So there is one segment of consumers that is highly price sensitive segment. So for example, the orange one. So this particular segment does not care about technical documentation, training, or product variety or quality of the product. This particular segment of consumers obtains a higher utility from customized products and the delivery time. So they're more concerned about any factors that could affect the price and the delivery time. So these are the orange bars for these 2 variables, delivery time and price. So that is about the price sensitive segment. Then there's another segment called the product segment, which is the blue bar. So if you look at product variety, so they derive a higher utility from variety available in the products, then quality of the products, and the level to which you can customize the products. So you identify the different segments based on the pathwords that you uncover. Now, how do you select a particular segment? So if you've identified 3 to 4 segments in the market, how would you go about selecting those segments? So this is an important part as well. So you have these, in this example, 4 segments over here. You have uncovered, based on the description, based on the descriptors, what are the key satisfaction drivers, like segment A goes for after-sales support, segment B goes for product quality, segment C values convenience, and D is a price-sensitive segment. So all these, the key driver has been listed for each of the segments. Similarly, you could also, if you have demographic information, you could also list the key demographic driving characteristic across the segments if they are very unique. So only them. So that will give you a big picture of what each of the segments is all about. After that, once you have all this information with you, you can also look at the average acquisition cost for each of these segments. You can look at the churn rate. Churn means at what rate will the consumer switch from my brand to another brand. So is there a particular segment of consumers that will switch relatively faster? So for example, here segment D. So that is highly price sensitive segment. It is likely to churn faster. So it's an important thing to understand. Would you really like to serve this segment of consumers if you are wanting to position your product as a premium brand? So these are some of the factors that become important. Then your average net present value or customer lifetime value of these existing segments, if you have that sort of information. Okay, so based on all these, so this is a very good chart to have if you have different types of information about the segments, to be able to decide on what segment you want to select and target your product for. So how would you do segmentation in the market? So we use a technique which is called as clustering. Clustering is, it is a statistical procedure which is used to identify what are the different groups that exist in a set of data points based on the variables that we feed into that algorithm or the statistical procedure. Now, there are a lot of sophisticated packages, a lot of software is available for clustering, really, including Tableau, which will do some basic clustering. But if you really want to do advanced level clustering using large amounts of unstructured data or learn machine learning, run machine learning algorithms on that large amounts of data, then probably SPSS or SAS would be good softwares. R would be another good software. MATLAB would be another good software to run these machine learning clustering algorithm. So the basic idea of clustering is what I'm going to discuss here, but depending on the data size, you would run the appropriate algorithms. All right, so idea of clustering, like we discussed, is based on identifying the different segments of consumers. Now, within each segment, the consumers are close to one another in terms of their average behavior. But the consumers across the different segments will be different in their behavior. So there's a vast amount of difference between the average behaviors of consumers in segment C and segment D. So think about this product. Let's say it's carpets. So a firm is trying to sell carpets, and two of the most important attributes it uncovers in the data is water resistance and strength. So it uncovers 4 segments. Now it wants to select which one of these segments. Now, if the firm has the capability to design carpets which have high water resistance and want to target the consumers which value water resistance as a trait, so probably this would be one segment of consumers, segment C, and another would be segment D. But which one of these to choose would again depend on the second attribute. If the firm has the capability to design high strength carpets which are valued by consumers, both high strength and water resistance, then segment D would be the segment to target. Besides the attribute importance, it also depends on the size of the segment. So though that is not available here, but you can do some market research to understand whether it is a growing segment, is it a mature segment of consumers, or is it a small segment of consumers? Currently, it's a niche, but has the capability to grow in the future. So those are also some of the factors that come into play when you are selecting the different segments in the market. All right, so if we have huge amounts of data, so remember that even the softwares have their limitations as to how much data, how many variables you can use for cluster analysis. So if it is huge amounts of data with thousands of variables, then we use a technique called factor analysis to reduce the number of variables in the data set. But we are not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on cluster analysis to form the segments. Then there is another technique called discriminant analysis, which is used to describe the segments. And then if you have another data set, a new data set of new consumers, you can use discriminant analysis to classify them to existing segments. So that's the whole idea about discriminant analysis. And then the McKinsey model is used to select the target segments that you want to serve. So we'll look at the McKinsey model and cluster analysis in this particular lecture. All right, so cluster analysis was segmenting the markets. Now, all of these factors I have discussed in numerous different ways with you on the previous slides, that you want to define the needs, you want to uncover the needs, you want to assess the similarity of the consumers. And similarity is a very important factor because that is what the softwares or the algorithms use to as a segmentation criteria. So when you run these softwares, the user criteria, which is called as the WARD's minimum variance criteria, that looks at the amount of variance between one cluster and another cluster. And there is another algorithm called as a k-means algorithm, which actually looks at the distance between two consumers in a cluster or across the clusters. So these are just various different ways, and you don't have to worry about the complexity of these, but the idea is that using the variance or using the distance between two consumers is used to understand how similar are the consumers. So we'll do one example of that. Then you select based on, so if there are 6 segments, then you would select which segments you want to serve. So let's go ahead and look at. So here is just an example of, let's say this is your data set. It has the consumers' importance ratings, the perceptions, the other types of variables, and you feed this data set in software like Tableau, SPSS, or SAS or R. And then what you're going to get is some, information in the tutorial today as to how the clusters are formed. So here is an example of matrix. Now, these are the these are the ratings that the consumers have given for, say, a product in terms of the durability, service, ease of use, price, and assignment. So just by looking at this little data matrix, if you analyze your data that you will collect just on the basis of the ratings, you will be able to uncover segments. So for example, let's take segment 1 and 4. What attribute do you think they really value, this particular segment values? Absolutely, because they have the highest rating. Customer 1 has a rating of 9 for durability, customer 4 has a rating of 10. Now think about the next segment, that is 2 and 6, right? So these two customers, what is the most important attribute for these two customers? So how are we uncovering the segment? We are looking at all of the ratings and we are seeing what is common between these two consumers. So consumer 2 gives the highest rating to ease of use, and consumer 6 also gives the highest rating to ease of use. So both of these customers are similar in the sense that they value ease of use as one of the attributes. So we can place them together. Ideally, we can think of placing them together in the same segment, but we will let the software run and tell that for us when we actually work with similar types of data in the tooth. Okay. And of course, when you run this segmentation analysis on your data. Here's another example of two customers, 3 and 5. So in this case, you will notice that this is the price sensitive segment because they give the highest rating to importance of price, both of them. There are some minor differences, of course, but both of these consumers are similar in terms of their importance of price. So just by looking at the data, it's always a good exercise when you get the data to look at the data, what it is telling you. Another thing that you can do is, let's say that you found that across the majority of the consumers, 2 attributes are really important. Let's say savings and how helpful the agent is in solving the problem. So you could take those 2 attributes and plot all the part words or importance ratings and see what kind of picture do you get. Are you able to see some segments in the data? And so that is another way of looking at the different clusters that might exist, given that you know that these are the most important attributes, right? Okay. Now let's take an example of how a software would actually do the clustering of the data for you. So let's say that these are 3 customers in the data set, and Joe, Sam, and Sarah. Now, Joe's ratings for premium saving is 4, and for importance of the agent is 7. And similarly, for Sam, it is 3 and 4, and for Sarah, it is 5 and 3. So if you plot these coordinates, let's say for Joe, now on the x-axis we have here is the premium savings, on the y-axis is the importance given to agent. So Joe's rankings are 4, 7. So 4 out here on the x-axis and 7 given to agent. So this is where Joe stands on this particular graph. Similarly, Sam and Sarah. Now, if we feed this data into a software such as Tableau or SAS, what is going to happen in the background? In the background, these softwares are going to determine what is the distance between Sam and Joe, what is the distance between Sarah and Joe, what is the distance between Sam and Sarah, and that distance is a measure of similarity, okay? And that measure of similarity will then be used to classify them together either in the same segment or in a different segment. So this calculation of the distance between the two, that is called as the Euclidean distance. So let me just see if the pen works. So this distance between 2 consumers, that is called as the Euclidean distance. I'll just mention that as ED, Euclidean distance. It is a measure of similarity. Now, let's see an example of how software would calculate this particular distance. Now, the formula that will be used. So let's say you want to calculate the distance between Joe and Sam. So you will look at their importance ratings for, both premium as well as agent. And what you're going to do is that Joe's rating for premium is 4, and Sam's rating for premium is 3. So 4 minus 3, you're looking at the difference between these two. 4 minus 3 whole square plus next attribute, that is the agent, 7 minus 4 whole square. And then you take the square root of whatever answer you get, and it'll tell you what is the distance between these two. So between Joe and Sam, the distance is 3.2. Now, I want you to do a similar exercise to calculate the distance between Sam and Sarah. Calculate. So the distance between Sam and Sarah, so you take the importance ratings of the first attribute, 3 minus 5 whole square. Then you take the importance ratings of the second attribute, that is 4 minus 3 whole square. So this is -2 squared, that is 4, and this is 1 squared, that is 1. So 4 plus 1 is 5. Take square root, and what you get as the answer is 2.23. And this is the pairwise distance matrix that has been created after calculating these Euclidean distance scores. So, so now you can see over here, the distance between Sam and Sarah is given as 2.23 out here. And the distance, so we've got this distance, and the distance between Joe and Sarah is 4.1. So from this, what we can conclude, and that is the important bit, is that the distance between Sam and Sarah is the smallest. So that means they are likely, they could possibly be clubbed together in the same segment as compared to other clubbings of the segment. And the distance of Joe from these two is the furthest. So that means that Joe behaves in a different way as compared to Sam and Sarah. So that is the basic intuition behind clustering and calculating the similarity between data points or the individuals in our data set. Okay, great. So now let's move forward to the next slide. Again, finding the clusters. So the software is going to use that same process to find the clusters based on the ratings data or perception data that you uncover, right? That you provide, you feed into that particular software. Now, the process of forming the cluster, again, you don't have to go into complicated complexities of the process that happens in the software, but the key intuition is that it's a stepwise process. So what happens is that the software starts with the entire data first, identifies some points to get started with at random. Okay, so it just identifies a random cluster, say that this is the cluster, then calculates the distance with all of the other objects, and then converts them into two clusters. And this whole process is repeated again and again to classify, reclassify the observations and see if there is some difference. So for example, all the dark blue dots here are a different cluster, but they have been reclassified. One red dot is here in cluster 1 and another red dot over here in cluster 2. So this process is called as classification and reclassification to make sure that the observations are being classified correctly, just to make sure that you get a very robust result in terms of your clustering. So that's the basic intuition about the clustering process stepwise. Okay. And then we come to the next slide, that is how many clusters should we choose? So the software is going to start with the original data set and provide you, the capability to see, let's say, 2 cluster solutions, 3 cluster solutions, 4 cluster solutions, 6 cluster solutions, but it is really up to you as an analytics person, which is the appropriate cluster for you to choose. Now, if there are, for example, it's a huge data set and you apply a machine learning algorithm on the data set to identify the clusters because you have no idea how many clusters there should be, then there are those types of clustering algorithms, which we call as hierarchical clustering. They will identify the optimal number of clusters for you and tell you. But if you already know there's some existing theory that based on the price sensitivity of the consumers, it is expected that for consumer packaged goods, we have 4 different types of clusters. So in this case, you already have some idea about the number of clusters in the market. Then you can run clustering technique based on the Euclidean distance, which we call as the k-means clustering tutorial, to identify different numbers of clusters and then examine them for yourselves and select the appropriate number of clusters. Okay, now if let's say you have done that, you are seeing different cluster solutions, how do you identify how many clusters you should go for? What is the optimal number of clusters in the data? So for that, some softwares like SAS, MATLAB, SPSS, they give you the capability to see what we call as the elbow plot. Now this point, the point where you reach the elbow, that is a point where you select the appropriate, that gives you the optimal number of clusters for your data. So you can use the plots as one of the ways to engage in cluster selection. The second way, what you can do is through the use of what we call a dendrogram. So single linkage cluster, this is nothing but clustering technique like k-means, which calculates the Euclidean distance. That's all that you need to know. So for example, here the pairwise distance matrix has been calculated by the software. And if you look at this matrix, the smallest distance recorded is between company 4 and company 3. That distance is 1.48. So 1.48, so these 2 companies have been clubbed together. So if you look at this, this is where 1.48 comes. So this is one cluster, they have been put together. Now another cluster is 1.49, that is company 1 and 2. So these 2 companies have been put together because their distance is the next smallest distance. Now, same way, based on, so the software is going to calculate this graph for you, prepare this graph for you, which is called as the dendrogram, which is based on these distances. Now you can use the dendrogram to select optimal number of clusters because it's very difficult to read through the whole matrix or understand this particular graph as such. So how do you use this graph to make a selection? Let's come to that in this particular slide. So I will go back to the previous slide, but I just want to show you that first. So in a dendrogram, what happens is it shows the distance or it shows the variance. Like for example, in this particular graph, the criteria used was minimizing the variance. So this is the minimized variance numbers that have been listed here, but that is not important. What is important is whether it is the variance or it is the distance that is listed over here. You look at at what points is the biggest jump. This is what you look at. So in this case, from 5 to 25 is the biggest jump. You draw a line over there and then look at all the clusters below that line. So we have one cluster which connects A and B together. There's another cluster which connects points C and D together. And there is another third cluster, which is supposedly a standalone cluster of point E. So that's how we determine that there are 3 optimal clusters in this particular data set. So that is the key takeaway from the slide, how to figure out the number of clusters from dendrogram. Now, the previous slide, all that it tells you is that apart from the distance similarity measure, the Euclidean distance was the one that we did previously. It is used by clustering algorithms like k-means. So k-means is a clustering algorithm which calculates the distances. Apart from that, there's another type of clustering algorithm called as WARDS, hierarchical clustering algorithm, which kind of uses this WARDS minimum variance criteria. So instead of calculating the distance, it tries to minimize the variance between the members of each group. So that is the basic intuition. That's all that you need to remember. And again, that WARDS procedure is also going to show the dendrogram that you can use to select the number of clusters. Okay. Now, how do you interpret the cluster analysis results? Once you have selected the appropriate number of clusters, you have to come up with the descriptives. So for example, if you have information about demographics, behavioral, lifestyle, attitude, then for each cluster, you can do a descriptive statistics of those variables to identify how each of the clusters would be different. And this is an example of SPSS as software, which shows you different types of classification or clustering algorithms, 2-step, k-means, hierarchical. K-means and hierarchical are the most common algorithms that we use. So generally, when we are doing research, what we do is we run a hierarchical clustering algorithm, which establishes the hierarchies within the data set to come up with some suggested solutions that say, for example, 3 is the best. And then we can run the k-means with 3 cluster solutions, 4 cluster solution to determine for ourselves whether indeed 3 is the best or not. And then we can decide on our own which is the optimal cluster solution we want to select. Okay, so again, this is information about clustering in SPSS, so we don't need to go into too many details. Now, how do you describe the market segment? So for example, like I said, if you have other descriptives, so what you could do is for a segment, you can, for example, you have descriptives on price, durability, service. So these are the part words that have been obtained for price, durability, and service. Now, in your data, you have information about the type of organizations that exist in this particular sector. Let's talk about cars to give you a more concrete examples, right? In the automobile sector or car sector, let's say there are some large companies, there are some medium, and there are some small manufacturing companies. For example, electric cars would be a smaller organization. Let's say battery operated cars could be small. There could be medium ones, and there could be large ones like Toyota, Honda, Mercedes, etc. So these are large organizations. So the consumers have given their ratings, and these are the part words that have been obtained on price, durability, and sensitivity. So you can, for each of these types of companies, you can sum up all of the importance ratings or part words, and you will get information about which for a segment, what type of consumers exist for large, medium, and small. So for example, here you could possibly see that the consumers for medium size organizations are more price sensitive. For small car manufacturers, they prefer durability, right? For large car manufacturers, they expect good quality, but they also expect very high service. So this is the sort of insights that you can derive. This is another example where for each of the segments A, B, and C, just one moment. For each of the segments A, B, and C, you have described, the age income in terms of the average age. You could do average age, median age, mode of age, the range that gives you the variance. That is, what is the variation in the age group in this particular segment. So that is also a useful way of describing your segments. You can plot the importance ratings or the part words that you obtain from the analysis for each of the consumers on the various attributes for the different segments, and that will also, that's just another way of, graphically representing your different cluster profiles. This slide looks complicated, but you just have to, this is just an example of a machine learning algorithm which uses tree-based classification. So there are, algorithms like the random forest algorithms, tree-based, which are essentially what they do is they construct neural networks, they construct these sort of hierarchical tree type of structure. So it starts with the whole data, say, for example, income is the first variable taken, and then it breaks it into subsegments based on age. So it starts with income based on age, then probably on gender, and so on. So it keeps creating those branches and the leaves, and that is called as a tree-based classification. And then you have another type of algorithm, which is called as the best offer query, machine learning algorithm, which is again tree-based decision, but you have very, you have small queries to be answered at each and every step. So for example, if you're offering professional services, are the employees working from home? Yes or no. Do they have a caller ID? Yes or no. If they do not have a caller ID, offer product A for them to sell, otherwise offer product B for them to sell, something along those lines. So it's more based on, decisions to be taken at each and every step. Then we come to the final step that is called targeting. So once you have identified the different segments, how do you select those segments? Is there a certain criteria that we can use to select a target market? So one is the characteristics of the segments, which we have studied in details in this particular lecture. You could also include other information, like if you have, for example, competitor strength, intensity, number of competitors, the fit of your company to that particular segment, which is also a very important factor. So the amount of competition and your own fit with the segment also matters. So essentially the process that you go through is like this, that you start out with two dimensions like market attractiveness and competitive strength. You will specify the criteria. It depends from product to product, company to company. Everybody has their own criteria for determining what is market attractiveness, what is competitive strength. Now, once you have those criteria listed out, then you are going to rate all the segments or the products or the markets based on each of those criteria that you have listed out in step one. Then you're going to weigh those criteria, calculate a weighting score, and then based on that, you're going to create a graph, and you're going to do a sensitivity analysis and choose your target market. Now, let us see these steps in terms of the actual numbers. And this is also something that you will be able to do for your project. So here is an example of relative market attractiveness analysis, relative competitive strength analysis. And let's say, the criteria for this particular form that it has given for attractiveness is the available market size, strong market segment growth potential, profitable market segment, customers, etc., etc. Barriers to new competitors entering the market. It is not necessary to have 8. You might have just 3, or some firms might have 10. So you will assign a weight. So because you are doing that conjoint survey, you are going to assign a weight for each of these segments. The sum of the weight should sum to 1 or 200 if you're putting it in terms of percentage. Now you will take each of the segments and you will score them based on, say, from 1 to 5, completely disagree to completely agree, how well that segment fits on this particular market attractiveness criteria. So is it a large sized segment? Do you agree or do you disagree? So you put your scores over here, and then you multiply the two to get a weighted score. Okay, and you will repeat the same exercise for competitive strength analysis. So at this point of time, let me show you. So I hope you can see the Excel file here. So this is the weight given over here. Let's say the criteria is 1, 2, and 3. That is the market segment size, let's say, and some other criteria. So we have assigned a criteria of weight of 0.2, 0.3, and 0.5 to each of these factors which determine the attractiveness of the market. Now, it is important that these sum to 1. These will sum to 1 if you have made no mistake. Okay, so that is a way of checking whether you're going okay. Now, these are the scores. Let's say for segment 1, you have 2 segments in the market, segment 1 and segment 2. So this is how the segment 1 scores on the criteria. This is how segment 2 scores on the criteria. And now for segment 1, you can calculate the weighted score as, let's say, 3 times 0.2. That's 0.6 and so on. And you can, again, use the same formula times 0.2 and determine the attractiveness of this particular segment. So you go for the segment which is higher on these criteria, right? So in this case, segment 1 tends to outweigh segment 2. Okay, so this was great. So once you have done this, once you have determined the attractiveness of your score, then you come back and quickly go back to that slide. Yeah. All right, so you do the same exercise for competitive strength and decide, take into account both of these. You're going to plot these scores. On the x-axis, you can have the competitive strength. On the y-axis, you have the competitive market attractiveness. And this is a very popular matrix, widely used in the industry. It's called as the GE matrix or the McKinsey portfolio matrix. You might have heard these terms before, but how they are formed is you're learning over here in this particular class. So the competitive strength, you can label it as low, medium, and high. And same way, attractiveness as unattractive, neutral, and attractive. You can use the same criteria that is used over here on this particular graph, and you plot the different scores for the segments that you saw on previous slides. So you can take this weighted score and this one and plot it on this particular graph and see where it stands. So let's say segment 1 stands here, segment 2 stands here. Then accordingly, you can choose. So the segments that fall in the green are the most attractive because they are high on competitive strength and attractiveness. Whereas the ones in the red are the ones that you should definitely avoid because they are neither competitive nor nor are they attractive in terms of market attractiveness. So profitability is likely to be low if you go for the segments which are in red color. The ones in the yellow color, they are the ones that where you have to maintain your status quo. That is either, you capitalize that, sort of use them as cash cows to make as much profit as you can. Or if you are in a mature market, you just preserve your position and protect yourself. So that is the whole idea. So red segment is exit strategies, harvest strategies. The green ones are the best segments to go for. So in your projects, this is something that you can definitely work on. Okay. All right. So just to sum up the whole, process of segmenting and targeting, what we did was today we looked at how we are segmenting the market based on certain variables. Like we talk more about the needs-based segmentation variables like conjoint part words, but you can also do demographic and behavioral segmentation. So just, oops, okay. And let me get this back, and my laptop battery is also running low. All right, and then finally, after you have done the segmentation using the cluster analysis, which gives you different number of clusters, you look at those clusters in terms of their attractiveness, build the GE McKinsey matrix, and then you determine which is the segment that you will go after. So this is the entire summary of what we have done. We started with the concept of segmentation, how to do segmentation using cluster analysis, use the output of cluster analysis to determine the target segments. So with that, we come to the end of the lecture.